it's just not possible to develop expertise in every domain of life where I need to know things, right? And this is just a fundamental constraint on what it is to have a human brain, but it also allows us to offload some of that epistemic work to other people. And that's why we have experts in universities, so people can dig in deeper and we can acquire knowledge that, previously nobody in a single lifetime ever could have acquired. Now, any time that you have to defer to somebody else for knowledge, which is going to be almost all the time, right? You have to make decisions about who to trust.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm thrilled to have Ami Palmer back on the show. Ami, we talked last year, I think it was in episode 235, about trust and propaganda and conspiracy theories. And at the time, you were a professor at Ohio Northern University. You've now made the move to Texas. How are you finding that move?
Well, at first, it's a little bit rough. Houston is a huge city with tons of traffic, and the weather here, it's like living in a sauna. Like we're in December now, and this is the first cool day that we've had. Basically, every day is around, in Celsius, it is like around 28 or 30 degrees, but extremely humid. So it's not my favorite place to be, but I'm finding the good things, trying to focus on those.
I remember filming an instructional there with Brandon Mullins years ago, and it was in the early summer. And it was we couldn't film with the air conditioning on. They had this massive air conditioning unit in the jiu-jitsu school, but if you turned it on, it would kill all the audio. So we would turn it on in between shoots, and then we would just fry. We'd be filming at 11 o'clock at night, midnight. It would still be, in Canadian terms, 35 degrees Celsius. It was right beside a movie theater that served alcohol. At the time, Magic Mike was playing. So every 2 hours, a whole bunch of drunk, horny Texas housewives would come out of the thing. They'd see two guys through the big glass windows rolling around the ground, start hooting and hollering, and we'd have to shut all the lights off and hide in the back because clearly we're just so dead sexy. Okay, they've dispersed. Turn the lights on again, film, and it was definitely one of the more challenging shoots that I've ever done. So I can vouch for I'll call it almost oppressive Texas heat.
Yeah, that's a good word for it.
And how are you finding the cultural shift from Ohio to Texas?
I think really the shift maybe isn't so much Ohio to Texas, but small town to big city. Because I was in a town population 40,000, and now I'm in the fourth largest city in the U.S. So that's probably the biggest shift.
It's super sprawling. And I know you've done judo for years, but you've started training jiu-jitsu again?
Yeah, I found this gem of a school, Hillian Gracie Academy. And yeah, I had, a lot of injuries from judo. And
weird.
Yeah, how did that happen? Getting slammed on the mat for, a couple decades. So I just, when the Delta wave settled down, I thought I would go see if I could find a school. And I was really, really pleased. To me, it is the epitome of what any martial art should aspire to, at least the way that he teaches jiu-jitsu, which is every sequence of moves is distilled to the simplest set of moves possible to handle that situation. So, I've seen a lot of YouTube videos where there's 7-step moves or 8-step moves. And I'm like, the resisting opponent, even if it works, I don't want to memorize this bunch of 7-step movements, right? I want to know, give me 3 movements that are going to address spider guard.
Right.
And so I just really appreciate the way that this particular school approaches jiu-jitsu.
How much of that is sort of that simplification is pedagogy or teaching style versus a different style of doing things? because you could invent any black belt versus salt worth of salt could come up with 20 details that would make or break a technique. Okay, I grip here unless the guy does this, in which case I do that. My little finger goes here, my thumb goes here, except this other situation, if I'm grabbing higher, they could spend, if you really put it to the touch, 25 minutes explaining every last little detail. And so some people do that. I think sometimes it's a concern for the students. Sometimes it's ego. Hey, look at how much I know.
Those are the new instructors.
Yeah. They're wanting to show everything every single time.
Yeah.
And some people show almost no details. And sometimes that's because they don't know any details. And sometimes that's because they're trying to, teach something that can be retained.
Yeah. So So I think you make a good distinction, right? Between, so there's the number of distinct positional movements in a sequence versus the amount of details within each positional movement, right? So what I'm enjoying about this particular style of jiu-jitsu is that even though like my instructor can explain at the most minute level of detail what's involved in each step, there are very few steps. So I don't have to memorize this long chain of movements. Each one, if I do it slightly wrong, is going to, lead to the opponent escaping.
Yeah. You end up with a space shuttle effect where some tiny little, a gasket failed on the space shuttle, and the whole thing with 200,000 moving pieces blew up.
Yeah. And this is actually, you've probably read, the Bruce Lee talks about this. The goal, your goal in martial arts is to strip away as many techniques as you can, and just like get to like have a very simple set of movements that you master and you understand inside out and backwards.
Yeah. Certainly when you see the top guys perform, they're not usually, there are some people out there who they're doing something different every day. And I guess their brains are just wired that way to retain a massive amount of diversity. But I'll say most world champions have got a few things that they do extremely well. They have 1,000 ways to get into to force their opponent into their game. They can adjust for all the different resistances and defenses, and they really know how to finish it. And judo is really the better example than jiu-jitsu, because how many throws does an average judo Olympic champion have?
Three.
Yeah.
Three.
Maybe 4.
And here's the thing. Everybody knows in advance what their throws are.
Yeah.
Right? But they know every single way to get you into the position for that throw. And like wrestling's the same too. Wrestlers will master, 1 or 2 takedowns or 1 or 2 ground techniques, and they just become unstoppable, even though you know what's coming. Right? You can't stop it. So I think this is just like I always say this: there's a difference between competition mindset and just like a student of martial arts mindset. Right? If I want to win competitions, I need to be an expert at a very narrow set of techniques. I need to know how to get into those techniques. Like you say, like all the champions, like wrestling champions, jiu-jitsu champions, judo champions, it's the same thing. But if I just want to explore the breadth of jiu-jitsu, the breadth of judo, then there's nothing wrong with me going off and exploring all these new things. I think that's fine too.
I would agree. And I think the customer ultimately is king. If there's a white belt who wants to learn how to berimbolo, I've worked on white belts or low blue belts with their berimbolo, with their Imanari rolls. Why? Because they wanted to, and they thought it'd be fun. In one case, somebody wanted to use it in a movie. That's an obvious exception. But, if it makes them happy, great. If they'll figure out soon enough that they actually need a good side mount escape. This is a self-correcting error over time. And who are we to judge? It's jiu-jitsu. The odds of really injuring yourself or your opponent are much less than in judo. If you're trying to master every throw in the gokyo, plus invent these other variations where you're wrapping the guy up in his lapel so that he can't break fall and then turning it into a Makikomi sacrifice throw and then landing on top of him. You're going to hurt somebody. You're going to hurt him or you.
Mm-hmm.
And in judo and jiu-jitsu on the ground, it's possible, but it's less likely.
That's right. Yeah.
So the last time we talked, basically propaganda and conspiracy theories. And I'm sad to report that from my survey of the internet, it doesn't seem to be going away. And I think it's getting worse. There are some very large commentators with very large followings. Joe Rogan is the guy du jour, who, as far as I'm concerned, have blood on their hands for spreading outright lies and misinformation. And we were talking about, you and I, how we can combat the insane set of accusations. I mean, I've people send me videos. Stephan, could you just watch this video? And it's just a 30-minute video, usually by a guy who's got a doctor in front of his name. A third of the time, that's a chiropractor. A third of the time, that's an osteopath. A third of the time, that's a doctor of English literature or a doctor of economics. And inevitably, it takes like 2 hours to go point by point by point and say, okay, this accusation here is based on this study here, and that study was then refuted, and they didn't use a control group, and blah, 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 blah. And this is a misinterpretation of the data. And this could be true, but it still has to be confirmed. And it takes 2 hours to write the damn thing out. It's a 2,000-word essay. And then a week later, the guy say, hey, would you mind looking at this new video? It didn't do any good.
Yep. Yeah, it's moving the bump in the rug. Actually, the way you introduced that, I think is a great opportunity to kind of jump into some of what I would want to talk to you about, which is how do we avoid this whack-a-mole treadmill where we just our friends that send us this conspiracy stuff. It's like drinking from a fire hose. It's not possible to go debunk every single argument. Right.
Well, I think there are two things going on. You mentioned whack-a-mole, and that's one thing. But there's also a debating tactic known as the Gish Gallop, where I just hit you with 85 accusations. This study showed this. This other study showed this. What about Uttar Pradesh? What about India? What about this? What about that? What about North Korea? Blah, 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 blah. And you're like, okay, Stephan, let's talk about Uttar Pradesh. And blah, 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 blah. Meanwhile, I keep going. Yep. And by you've refuted that one thing, I've hit you with another 50 accusations. So that's the Gish Gallop.
Yeah.
And then the whack-a-mole phenomenon is like every week it's a new major talking point that comes up in the conspiracy, anti-vax, COVID denial world. Yep. And it's almost like a coordinated memo has gone, hey, talk about this preprint.
Yeah.
So I think the two things are going on. It makes it super frustrating.
Yeah. So there are two general solutions here. Like one, to avoid the Gish Gallop, you have to get them to commit to a claim, and you don't let them out. You say, why is it that you are reluctant to get the vaccine? Do you believe that the vaccine is more harmful than COVID? Yes or no? Right? And they have to commit. Right? Now, if they say, no, I think COVID's more dangerous than the vaccine, it's like, okay, we agree then, right? So now, they're gonna say, if they're sincere, they're gonna say that I think that the vaccine is more dangerous than COVID. I say, okay, I want you to give me the evidence that what to you is the most compelling evidence for that claim. And that if it turned out to be false, you would at least reduce your credence in the claim that the vaccines are more dangerous than COVID itself. And now, no matter anything else that they bring up, you have to bring it back to that issue. And we settle that first. And we'll talk about why we have to settle that issue first later. But that's because that's at the heart of it, right? If you do not settle the scientific question, nothing else matters. And we're going to show that all the other tangential questions that they bring up, tyranny, my body, my choice, all these come back to the empirical question. And so we actually can't move on until we settle this. So do not let them. So that's how we handle the Gish Gallop.
What if the Gish Gallop is being employed in service of that one belief, right? My belief, let's say the belief is that the vaccines are more dangerous than getting COVID.
Yeah.
And now I'm going to Gish Gallop you with 1,000 different facts. VAERS data here shows, Dutch VAERS here shows. A friend of mine said this super world-renowned doctor who's on Joe Rogan said this other thing. I'm just getting started here.
Yeah.
So already now you got four lines of evidence in scare quotes coming in already.
Yeah. That's why it's so critical to say what for you is the most compelling evidence for this claim. What is that if it turned out to be false, you would reduce your credence in that claim, right? So that way, all these other things that are peripheral go away. Let's just talk about this one thing. And you told me in advance that you find it really compelling, and that if it turned out to be false, that you would reduce your credence in the claim that vaccines are more dangerous than autism. And you stubbornly stick to that, right? What is the claim? Okay, now give me the evidence for that claim. And usually at this point, they stop talking to me because I think a lot of people actually, the more intelligent ones realize that there actually is no evidence.
Well, they may also not be giving you the main reason for let's say they just hate Joe Biden and how vaccination has been divided along political parties is insane. This didn't used to be a thing. This is a new thing. People think, well, Republicans have always been anti-vaccination. No, I mean, who was a stereotypical anti-vax person in 2005? It was some granola, some vegan granola, gluten-free mom who wanted to move to a commune of sorts and was homeschooling her kids. That was
sorry. Let me just correct you on one thing there. That's actually not true.
No, it wasn't so divided along partisan lines.
Well, it's Christian evangelicals that have historically been anti-vax.
Okay.
So there were two. So this is what happened in the pandemic. Up until the pandemic, there were two non-overlapping anti-vax groups. There were the crunchy granolas, the liberals, the on the coastal elites, right? There was them, and then there were the Christian evangelicals. Those groups did not interact until the pandemic. And that's what happened, is these two groups started working together. So all the alt-med, normally alt-med is on the left of the political spectrum.
Right.
But now we've seen them move to the right with the QAnon and all this stuff.
Yeah. So that's, I guess my point is it didn't used to be partisan in the sense that I'm on the left, therefore, well, I guess I was saying I'm on the left. There were examples pre-pandemic of left and right being anti-vaccine. Now it's almost a calling card for the right.
Yes.
Not entirely, but
not entirely. You still have the alt-med hardcore anti-vax fans.
Sure, the yoga practitioners and the wellness people.
Chiropractors, naturopaths.
Okay, so now let's just take that example that I was saying. I told you that I'm worried about the vaccines being more dangerous than COVID. But the real reason is because I just want to own those libs. That's the real reason when you dig down into it. So I don't like being pinned down on this whole science stuff when it's really an ideological issue.
Uh-huh. Well, I mean, that is just a really weird objection because usually the argument that you hear is that the vaccines are going to poison us.
Mm-hmm.
And it might be like a tribal expression of their allegiance to be anti-vax. But I think these people, like, they believe something like this, right? They have a value, which is, I want to do what is best for my health, which is something we all share. Okay. So, okay, how do I best realize this value, right? This is what's called, the fancy word is instrumental rationality, right? There is substantive rationality, which is whether the ends that we pursue are rational, right? And there's debate over whether ends themselves can be called rational or not. And then there's instrumental rationality, so which is the means by which I pursue my ends, are those rational?
Can you
So,
give me examples of those, please?
yeah. So, for example, I want to get from A to B as quickly as possible. Right? I'm driving. Right now, I look at my GPS, and one route says, well, if you take say Oak Street, it's going to take you 10 minutes, right? But if you go down Cambie, and then you go downtown, and then you come over, go into North Vancouver and then loop back, it's going to take you 45 minutes. You say, oh, I'm going to go the long way. You're like, wait a minute. You said that what you're trying to achieve is to get home as quickly as possible, right? We can't call what you're doing rational, instrumentally rational, because the means by which you are pursuing your end actually undermines the very thing that you're trying to pursue.
Okay.
Right?
So the argument there, to put this into a perspective, not to do with driving, you're trying to protect your health and the health of your children, but what you're doing isn't rational, since it's actually making the risk to health of you and your children worse.
Exactly right. Yeah. So this is exactly where we want to drive the conversation, right? So, because everybody, what we want to do is we want to find common epistemic ground, right? We want to say, okay, what does it mean to be rational? To be rational means to pursue your ends in a way that they are likely to be achieved, right? So if you say that you are concerned about your health and the health of your children, but you engage in activities that are extremely deleterious to your health and the health of your children, then we can't call you rational in the sense of instrumentally rational, right? So someone says, I'm trying to lose weight, and they're stuffing their face with like cake. Like, well, do you think by eating cake you're going to lose weight? No. Okay, well, what is our assessment of that person's instrumental rationality?
Okay.
Right? They're not instrumentally rational.
Right.
So we could all agree on that, whether we're anti-vax or flat earthers, we can all agree on that concept of rationality.
Okay. So then it comes down to the data that they're using. It comes down to, I heard on Joe Rogan that if I'm under 50, that I don't need to be vaccinated, and that just as many people have died from the vaccine as they have from COVID. And here's some VAERS data to prove it.
Yeah. Yeah. So they say, okay, what is my value? My value is I want to protect my health and the health of my children. And so there's like the normative stuff, which is like values, right? And there's the empirical stuff, which is facts about the world, right? Scientific facts, right? Like, what color is this? How heavy is it? And so these things come together in the actions that we choose, right? So I have a particular value that gives a direction to my actions, right? And then I assess the state of the world to see how best to get there. Now, if I have data that says that the vaccines cause more health problems than does COVID, then it's rational for me to avoid the vaccine.
Yeah.
right?
I think there are
So
many people making intelligent decisions based on terrible data. The example that I've used before is if I tell you, hey, you're coming back to Canada. By the way, since the last time we were here, we all now drive on the left side of the road, just like we do in England. And then the pilot tells you, yeah, just remember, when you rent the car, you're going to drive on the left side of the road. And then the guy that you're renting your car from says, remember, drive on the left. And there's a big sticker on the front dashboard saying, drive on the left. And you drive on the left and you crash into an oncoming car and you die. You made an intelligent decision based on bad information.
That's right. Yeah, importantly, we'd say you're non-culpable, right? From a point of view of like both like an assessment of the rationality of your action and also morally. You're in both those assessments, you're non-culpable.
Okay. So then how do we get to trying to convince people that the data they're using to make bad decisions is in fact bad? Because soon enough you end up, well, you've got your facts, I've got my facts. Statistics can be used to prove whatever.
Yeah.
I just trust in my immune system.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So anytime you start to put a little bit of pressure on an anti-vaxxer, a common response is to retreat to relativism, right? As though like there's no difference between any kind of evidence, right? But this is the thing. What we want to do is show them by their own standards. I'm not imposing some outside standard of rationality or reason on you. I'm going to use the things that you endorse and show you that from the very epistemic commitments that you have, you actually adopt a different conclusion than what you thought.
Okay.
So let me just kind of summarize. So the key is, do not discuss evidence, discuss standards of evidence.
Okay. So how would you use that to, let's say VAERS data is the bridge I'm going to die on. VAERS data shows just as many deaths post-vaccination as it does from COVID. So there have been, I'm making this up, and it's obviously not true, 800,000 deaths associated with vaccination in the United States and 800,000 deaths from COVID, most of which could have been prevented if people weren't fat and lazy and on testosterone like the way that I am. But because there's going to be a whole bunch of goalpost shifting and red herrings thrown in there as well. But the central argument would be that just as many people have died as from vaccination as from the actual disease. And so how would you, based on VAERS, how would you go about?
So remind me. So my understanding, I want to get to that. It's really important. But my understanding is that the VAERS data shows that the incidence of myocarditis and pericarditis and death are higher than what was reported in the Pfizer study, but not higher than COVID. Right. So I think that's what the VAERS studies show. So here's what I do. Somebody presents me that information, and I say, okay, I'm going to accept this as true. Right. Oh my goodness, the vaccines are causing myocarditis. Right? This is like, they love myocarditis now, right? Or the vaccines, some people are getting the vaccine and they're dying. This is terrible. I say, suppose even more people were dying. Would that be better or worse? Like, oh, that'd be worse. Suppose even more people were getting myocarditis from the vaccines. Would that be better or worse? Oh, that'd be worse. Okay. So if you want to protect your health, and let's say another vaccine came out that had even higher rates of myocarditis, even higher rates of death, would you want to avoid that vaccine even more than the current vaccines? Oh, yes. Okay. And then you say, well, what if that vaccine had this rate of death and this rate of myocarditis, and you give the numbers for COVID, for COVID, right? But you don't tell them it's COVID. You say, oh, yeah, I definitely would not want that, right? I would choose, as a forced to choose, I would choose the Pfizer vaccine over that new vaccine. Say, okay, well, guess what? You just chose the vaccine over COVID because the numbers I gave you, those are COVID.
Okay. So then, having had these conversations a few times, I'm going to just start accusing your sources, right? I'm going to say, well, who says those are the real rates of myocarditis from COVID? That's just big pharma trying to scare you into taking their vaccines to make money, and it's also the government trying to control you, and it's Dr. Fauci, since he's pretty much spawn of the Rothschilds or whatever today's theory is.
Yeah.
So I don't even trust your numbers. So there.
Yeah, I see that. That's fine. Show me a source that you think is reliable, that gives the numbers for the death rate, per 100,000 for COVID, and for the rates of myocarditis for COVID. Let me look at it. Right? So that's strategy number one. Ask them for a source. And I don't care what source they get. It's going to be higher than the vaccines, right? Rates of myocarditis are in, children, or sorry, in the highest risk group, which is like young men, right? It's still 6 times higher for COVID, right? For rates of myocarditis. And also like with the, I don't want to go too much on a tangent here on my tangent on myocarditis, but, myocarditis, merely it's like having a strained muscle, right? You can have a really minor strain that the next day you wake up and it's fine. You can have a strain that lasts the week, right? Merely having myocarditis doesn't tell us anything about severity, right? So that's just an aside. But the other thing is, I'll say, well, okay, so I agree with you. We should not be trusting Fauci. Why don't we go look at the Canadian statistics, the French statistics, the British statistics, the German statistics, the Spanish statistics, the Italian statistics, the Chinese statistics. Like, let's go through every country. And like, what are they going to do? Tell me that every single national public health board is corrupt? That is just what, like, you can't make that claim straight faced.
I have had people make that claim, but when I go to that line of argumentation, like, okay, if you don't trust the United States, are you saying that the people who control, that the CDC is also controlling Albania, Switzerland, Denmark, Holland, France? Usually that stops the conversation. I don't think it convinces anyone, though. And sometimes I have heard people say, yeah, big pharma controls it all, and it's just governments. It's basically a variation of the Illuminati is controlling all this.
Well, okay, so okay, good. So now they've done they've painted themselves into a corner, right? So they've basically used a species of the argument from ignorance. They're saying we actually don't know what the death rates are, and what the rates of myocarditis or whatever, long COVID, we actually don't know. So what follows from we don't know? Well, it could be much worse. You can't infer, you can't make the logical move from we don't know, therefore it's less severe. From don't know, all you can say is don't know. Right? And notice like the asymmetry, right? So hydroxychloride proponents and ivermectin, they'll always say, well, look, we just need to do more research, right? So they're going from we don't know, therefore it works. Right? Wait, hold on a second. You are not applying the same standard consistently, right? You went, in the case of COVID, from we don't know, therefore it's actually not as bad as they say, right? Or in the case of vaccines, well, we don't know the long-term effects, to We don't know the long-term effects, therefore it must be really bad. No. We don't know the long-term effects, therefore there could actually be a lot of benefits that we don't know about. Right? So actually that's actually this with the flu shot. This is actually true. The flu shot actually reduces the rate of cardiac events because it reduces inflammation. There's like a downstream benefit of the flu shot. So again, going back to epistemic principles that we can all agree on. When I say I don't know, I can't therefore infer that it's going to be good, or I don't know, therefore it's going to be bad. No, I don't know means I don't know.
Well, I remember you kind of touched on it a little bit, and it's so frustrating for me to watch, because I've seen this happen long before COVID with various supplements. Okay, so I took your fermented horsetail root and I didn't get any benefits. Well, did you take it first thing in the morning? Yeah. Oh, well, that's why. You should have taken it right after a workout. Okay, I'm now taking it right after my workout and haven't noticed a difference, and now there's a study saying it doesn't work. That's because they didn't combine it with vitamin C. This was exactly the way the whole hydroxychloroquine schmozzle was last year. Hydroxychloroquine works. Well, no, it doesn't. Yeah, you need to give it earlier. All right, it doesn't work early either. You need to give it with zinc and vitamin D. You need to, well, I mean, how many studies have been done now on this frickin' medication based on like, oh, you should do it slightly differently. You need to do it earlier. We've got this, I'm ranting at this point, if you hadn't noticed. But we've got this preordained belief that this magic thing has to work.
Yeah.
And we're going to dismiss all evidence to the contrary by saying you didn't do it in just exactly the right way.
This is great. This is a great example of the importance of philosophy of science, right? So, going back the middle part of 20th century, 19th century, right? 19th century. No, wait. I always get this mixed up.
20th century. What?
20th century, 20th century, the 1900s. So there's a big debate in the philosophy of science. Like, it's called the demarcation debate. Like, what's the difference between pseudoscience and science, right? And Karl Popper, originally said, well, it's falsificationism, right? Whether you can falsify a statement, right? So someone makes a claim, right? This supplement works, and then if I can falsify it, then that's evidence of pseudoscience, right? But the problem with Popper's view is that you can always have like a supplementary hypothesis. Oh, no. It's not that it doesn't work. It's just you didn't take it at the right time, right? So you can keep it going. And so this guy Lakatos comes along and he advocates for what's called like methodological falsificationism. Don't worry about the fancy terms. All it means is that you have to look at the trajectory of the research program, right? So if over time, the research program isn't yielding positive results, then that's a sign of pseudoscience, right? It's a dead research program, right? You don't look at individual studies because we know there's all sorts of ways that studies, individual studies can go wrong, right? You have to look at the literature over time. What's happened? This is what happened with, up until the 70s, like many universities had parapsychology researchers. But then over time, they couldn't yield positive results. So all those departments shut down. It was a pseudoscience.
Men that stare at goats department.
Yeah, exactly. It was a pseudoscientific field. And so the same thing here. Okay. Eventually, if there is a positive therapeutic effect for something, over time, we should start to see that effect. But if over time, you consistently get negative effects or like subclinical size effects, that's a sign of pseudoscience.
Yeah. I've seen the same thing in the martial arts. There's that fantastic segment where, George Dillman, he was he was a knockout guy, one of these karate knockout guys, and basically either clubbing people on the head or hitting them on the side of the neck by, I think it's the vagus plexus there, which is a legitimate target to knock somebody out. But then he went into like remote knockouts where he's like manipulating energy, and it's basically straight up McDojo life stuff. And he's like got this long explanation of like, I'm activating your spleen 4 point, and then I'm discombobulating your liver 3 point. and put together it sets a harmonic resonance that causes you to collapse. It's very impressive sounding. And I'm making this up. I wish I could spout it verbatim. And then some MMA guys went to the gym and he tried to knock them out. It might have been, I want to say Diego Sanchez. There's like a 50% chance it was Diego Sanchez. But of course, I'll look it up after this. And he couldn't do it. He couldn't knock him out from a distance, strangely. And he's like, yeah, well, that's because you're rooting your tongue on your, I don't know, your phlegm 4 point at the top of your mouth. Yeah. And that's creating a circuit. So it's basically the expanding hypothesis that this works 20% of the time. This works every time, except if you're, just intuitively rooting your tongue on the correct part of your mouth to nullify this chi flow circuit.
Yeah, and that's again, why it's important to understand the philosophy of science, right? And why falsificationism alone isn't a good measure for whether something is science or pseudoscience, right? Because there's always a way to spin an alternative hypothesis.
So then the alternative there is, has that field over time shown more and more convincing results?
That's right.
So I don't know, I'm trying to think of an example in the supplement world, but I think it's hard because
where there's been convincing results.
Well,
there's only one, and that's creatine.
Yeah, I'll say two with the pre-workouts, because they're just loaded with caffeine and sugar.
Yeah, sure. So caffeine.
If you take a ton of caffeine and sugar, I have a friend in the fire department who's like, Steph, take a look at this. This is pre-workout. I really like this. Is this bad for me? Well, it depends how much you're taking. Yeah, I take about 8 scoops a day. We worked it out. It was like 12 espressos a day. Like, oh my God. No, stop. It's like, I felt so good when I was taking it.
Yeah, you were high.
Yeah. And so, I think in some sense, for a lot of the supplement industry in the bodybuilding / athletics world, it's just easier to come up with the new supplement of the day. Mm-hmm. Fermented guarana root, and then push it for a while, and then just move on to the next supplement.
Well, here's the other thing that happens, right? So there'll be like a preliminary study, right? Before there's any control. It's just like preclinical trial, right? That shows it works in a petri dish, like something like this, and everything works in a petri dish, right? Or has some sort of activity. So they'll publish the low quality preclinical trial, or even like a phase 1 trial, and then the results will be overturned in a phase 2 or phase 3 trial. But the industry doesn't publish those results, right? But the preliminary trial will get a ton of play in the media because all natural supplement does this, and it's in the supplement industry's interest to get that publicized.
Yeah.
Right. But so once it's easier to get
it's easier to get significant results from a small, underpowered, not controlled trial. I mean, Alpha Brain would be a good example. I think I remember looking at that trial showing that the biggest money making product from Onnit. What's the problem? It was tiny, the study, and it was also done, I want to say, by like Aubrey Marcus's cousin. I wish I had that at the top of my at the front of mind. But you had one study done by somebody who's related to somebody in the company with like a tiny handful of people. It's not been independently replicated, and you've built this giant money-making empire off of it.
Yeah, it's very easy. So what you do is you run, you have a choice, right? You can run one study of 100 people or 10 studies of 10 people.
Okay, you and me are going to design a supplement. What do we want? We want something that makes people stronger, faster, prevents balding, and increases penis size. And so we're going to grass clippings from my lawn, and we're going to call it Grass Tech. Yeah. So how do we get?
Well, we should probably use Tibetan grass.
Okay, Tibetan grass, or okay, or we'd use the a Latin name or something.
It's tended to by the Buddhist monks.
Okay, Okay, Tibetan grass. So how do we design a study that's going to give us results? We need this thing to work. You and I both mortgaged our
Yeah.
houses and
Uh,
into the marketing. Like, we're in it. We've got to make this thing work.
so first of all, we make sure that we select. So we select people for the study that want these results, right? So we put up signs when we recruit for the study. Do you want to increase penis size, increase your strength, increase your energy levels? Sign up for the study. So now we already have people that have an expectation of the intervention working, right? So we've already biased our sample, right? The next thing we do is rather than publish one study of 100 people, we run 10 studies with 10 people each. And just because of the way randomness, of results works, or the clumpiness of events, some of those studies will yield positive results, especially if we don't use any controls and we don't blind the researchers and we don't blind the participants, right? We already know there's expectation bias. We already know that research subjects are prone to wanting to please the researchers, so they want to report a positive result. And we also know that researchers have a bias. They want a positive result because they want to get published, right? So what we do, out of the 10, statistically, some are going to have positive results. We just don't publish the negative studies. We publish the positive studies. Right? That's how we do it. Now we have the positive results. We publish it. We phone a bunch of media outlets. We say, look, Tibetan monk cultivated grass extract, does all these things. Yeah. There's a great book. Let's see, do I have it here? Oh yeah, here it is. Yeah, how to basically create a trial to get positive results.
Really? What's
This
it called?
Snake Oil Science.
Okay.
Written by R. Barker Bosel. This guy was like high up in the NIH for years. He knows everything there is to know. Highly recommend.
So let's just jump back to arguing with anti-vaxxers, since that does seem to be the topic of the day. So at first you were saying to try and get them to commit to one claim.
Yeah.
And if you could and bring some evidence for that, and ask if you could prove that evidence was wrong, would that cause them to shift in their belief? That's right. So kind of try and get how would that conversation go? Vaccines are killing people, Ami. Vaccines are killing people. Yeah, so I can actually read you a conversation. They're coming for our kids. The virus is never a threat to children, but they're trying hard, blah, blah, blah. This is me. Here's the claim I'd like to see evidence for. The COVID vaccines present more risks to health than COVID does. You believe this strongly, and so you must have proportionately strong evidence for the belief. Rather than ask me to watch someone else's interpretation of evidence, talk to me in your own words and provide primary evidence. If I had more time, I'd sit through all the videos. So how can we provide evidence for something that has just been administered and we have no long-term studies? So what already he's feeling the pressure, right? He can't provide the evidence. But the thing is, whenever, like I said, I always accept their evidence. Because the claim isn't you. This is the thing. The anti-vaxxers will always come to you with studies of side effects for vaccines. Fine. But that's not what matters. What matters is relative risk, right? Not absolute risk. You have to compare the risks with the alternative case, which is, in a pandemic,
Your choices are get COVID, probably multiple times, or get the vaccine. Right? So give me all that data. Give me all the risks of vaccines.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Now, let's look at the risks of COVID and compare them. And you told me that you don't want to get the vaccine because you're concerned about your health. Well, if risk A is 0.1 and risk B is 10 times that risk, what does a rational person choose? An instrumentally rational person choose. So we always bring it back, right?
So part of the problem here, I mean, is that you and I have probably spent far too much time in the trenches and looking at studies and watching people's fucking YouTube videos for our own mental health.
Yeah.
And so I feel fairly comfortable, like and my background science, your background science, we both feel fairly comfortable going to the primary sources saying, okay.
Background is philosophy.
Yeah, okay. You've spent enough time in academic libraries and studying the philosophy of science.
Yeah. Yes, true.
And you understand what the difference between a single blinded trial and a double blinded trial
is. I just don't want to misrepresent myself. That's
okay.
All. Yeah.
But that's not most people. And they're typically arguing with somebody who's going to, or they're often arguing with somebody who's just going to blast them with a whole bunch of studies. And they have no way of independently knowing, assessing the validity, or even knowing where to go with that. Like, they don't have a sense of what the background rate of myocarditis is in a population. They don't have a sense of what the background rate of death is in a certain age group. They don't have a sense of, they don't even know how bloody mRNA vaccines really work. They just like, hey, most scientists are saying this, and I know, I don't know, like, it's terrifying when Stephan Kesting, some jiu-jitsu nerd, people are coming to me for advice. Now, I think I'm doing a pretty good job of following the science, but mainly I'm saying, okay, follow public health measures, and here's why I would follow them. But they don't have that background to necessarily engage with the people on the facts, especially going to their data, like not doing your strategy of not disagreeing with their sources.
Yeah, so this is a great point. So the old epistemic model of how human beings are is that we get facts and we contemplate and we reason through them, but this is just not descriptively how humans arrive at beliefs, right? We are fundamentally social creatures, and so is our epistemology, like the way we acquire knowledge, right? And this is just a simple limitation on our cognitive capacities, right? Like, if I want to know about accounting, I don't go get a degree in accounting and then I need to fix my car, so now I'm gonna go like become a mechanic. Oh no, my toilet isn't working. Now I gotta learn. I gotta become a plumber, right? It's just not possible to develop expertise in every domain of life where I need to know things, right? And this is just a fundamental constraint on what it is to have a human brain, but it also allows us to offload some of that epistemic work to other people. And that's why we have experts in universities, so people can dig in deeper and we can acquire knowledge that, previously nobody in a single lifetime ever could have acquired, right? Because I can just go like, okay, what should I believe about this?
You're freed up from the requirements of running a trap line to get fur, trying to grow a couple of crops to get carbohydrates, and shoot the occasional squirrel with an arrow to bring protein to your family.
Exactly. So now, any time that you have to defer to somebody else for knowledge, which is going to be almost all the time, right? You have to make decisions about who to trust. And you can't escape this. You have to choose one way or the other, right? You have to choose somebody. And so the question is, why are you choosing this person, this group of people, rather than this group of people, right? Now, sociology tells us descriptively how people choose who they trust, right? This is fairly well understood. But the philosophical question is, who ought we to trust for information, right? So, for example, I mean, all the way going back to Plato, right? Plato in the Apology and also in the Theaetetus has this, in the Meno, has this argument about, okay, when you want to get your horse shoed, who do you go to get your horse shoed? Oh, I go to the horseshoe guy, right? When you want your food cooked, who do you go to get your food cooked? The guy who spent his life cooking, right? And so on, right? This is a familiar argument now. But where a lot of people start to lose the path is it gets confusing when people look up, at least seem to have the same level of expertise, right? When there's disagreement between experts, that's where things get really confusing for a layperson, right? But you have to understand, this is what's difficult to understand, is that within expertise, there are subdomains. So I always, one example I'll use is like, suppose let's say you have a lung infection, right? Are you going to go, okay, did you listen to a doctor or a mechanic? Well, that's easy. I listen to the doctor. But if I say, okay, well, one doctor is telling me I should take this medication, another doctor is telling me I should take this other medication. Say, well, what kind of doctors are they? One doctor is a respiratory specialist. The other doctor is a gynecologist. Well, just because they're both doctors doesn't mean they have the same specialty expertise, right? And so just like I wouldn't go for medical advice I wouldn't go to a gynecologist for medical advice about my lungs, okay, even though the gynecologist is going to have better knowledge than a layperson, right? Given the choice between a gynecologist and a lung specialist, I'm going to go to the respiratory specialist, right? And so when we see these people that with medical degrees or PhDs behind their name giving medical advice, we have to ask the further question. Okay, yes, they're an expert, but are they a relevant expert?
Even if they're a relevant expert, I think we can always find, if we have a large enough pool of relevant experts, we can always find the one or the two or the three contrarians within the field.
Yep.
And whether it's mental illness, whether it's grift, whether it's academic arrogance and they think that they're right and everybody else is wrong, you can always find like the one guy who has a radically different opinion from everybody else. And I think Sam Harris has talked about this quite well, in that two things are true. All science is driven forward a lot of science is driven forward by contrarian opinions, right? Galileo had a contrarian opinion. It turned out he was right. It drove science forward. But most of the time, if you have to bet on what's right, you want to go with the mainstream scientific belief, because that's your highest percentage of being right. It's rare that a contrarian opinion is correct. When a contrarian opinion is correct, it does advance the field significantly. When you start washing your hands before helping a woman give birth, that advanced obstetrics by quite a few years. But the other 85 things that have been proposed that would have been radically game-shifting in obstetrics ended up being false leads. So most of the time, the dominant narrative is correct. If you had to bet.
Yes. And this is a great point about how propagandists manipulate our this heuristic to defer to a consensus of experts, right? So they'll use what's called a magnified minority, right? So the Great Barrington Declaration,
which
or
we talked about last time.
Every couple of years, like in Climate Change Deniers, will come out with a list of people with letters after their name that say climate change is not man-made or something like this. So what they're doing, so first of all, these are almost never relevant experts, right? So they fail that test of relevant expertise. But the other thing is that, okay, so let's say you get 10, like we have the frontline doctors, right? Is in the So okay, you can find 10 doctors, maybe even relevant experts, right? But compared to how many that are going the other direction, right? In any other situation, right? This is the thing. This is what you always have to bring it back to. You have to bring it back to principles and commitments that people would apply in any other situation. So in any other situation, if 90 mechanics say it's your alternator and 10 say it's your regulator, what are you going to do, right? You're not a mechanic. You don't understand the reasons for the diagnosis. You have to defer. You have to make a choice. You're always going to go with the 90%. That's just what it means to be rational, right? Like, on what basis would you go with the 10%? Other than you already want that answer to be true.
So what is the attraction then, and maybe you just answered it in your last sentence, what is the attraction then of always taking the contrarian position? I think some people enjoy the contrarian position because it pisses other people off. Mm-hmm. And they enjoy the contrarian position because it makes them feel special. It makes them feel like they are the keeper of secret knowledge. I alone, us few, us happy few are the only people who know the truth behind, I don't know, climate change, earthquakes, ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, COVID, vaccination. We're the embattled minority, and it becomes much more about group identity then.
Oh yeah, huge part of it is like this, like, I have access to secret knowledge, like I am in the select few. But the other thing, I see this like a lot with the anti-vaxxers, is interesting. If I were a psychoanalyst, like, I would have a field day with this. At the same time, they see themselves as victims, but they also see themselves as heroes, right? They're fighting, like they're fighting for our rights too. They're the ones that are fighting for our freedoms, and us sheep can't see it, right? So they get this like feeling like I'm the hero. I'm going to save civilization from tyranny, but at the same time, I'm also a victim, right? So I think like psychologically, like there's like, it feels like really good. Like it gives you life meaning.
Well, that's certainly a position that many of the gurus in the space have adopted, right? Oh, look at me. I'm so repressed. I'm being help. I'm being silenced. Woke culture is silencing me. And I've got a podcast with fucking 50 million downloads a week. Yeah. And I'm now I'm being interviewed, by other big podcasts, and we're all going to talk about how incredibly silenced we are. And we've convinced roughly, I don't know, a third of the North American population that our side is correct. But we're the victims, and we're being repressed. Help, I'm being repressed, as I think they said in Life of Brian.
Yeah, no, it's laughable. So I was thinking that there are a couple other very common dodges that anti-vaxxers will use. Because here's the thing, like I said at the beginning, this is about the empirical facts. This is about the science. Okay. And what they will, because this is the thing why I'm so comfortable allowing them to just give me whatever study they want, because I know that they can't defend their view on comparative grounds. Right? If you compare the risks of vaccines to the risks of COVID, it's an order of magnitude different. So I will accept any claims they give me on the risks of vaccine. I'll be cool. Yeah, I'll just accept it. I'm not even going to argue with you. But let's compare it. So you have to keep the conversation there. Now, here's a couple of ways that they try to get out of that. So number one is they'll say, well, I just think it's tyrannical for the government to make us get vaccines, right? So they're infringing on my liberty, right? And look, this is a really serious issue. Like, it's true, you cannot impose medical treatment on people like that. You can't do that. You can't strap someone down and force a medical procedure on them, Okay. So
You can if they're
this is,
deemed not competent. But then that's a whole decision needs to be made as to whether they are competent to make
yeah,
decisions
and
for
the
themselves.
treatment has to be relevant to their incompetence, not anything else. So anyways, the whole other thing. So here's the thing. You have to ask them, okay, well, let's distinguish between a vaccine mandate and compulsory vaccines, right? Compulsory vaccine is when they come and they strap you down and they inject you with vaccines. That's not what's happening. We have a vaccine mandate. A mandate is like light coercion. Basically, we are going to remove certain privileges from you, like access to public spaces or public resources, if you don't get the vaccine. Okay. But no one's strapping anybody down. Okay. Now, the issue is, but again, so we want to bring the issue back to the scientific issue, right? There's a why. Okay. Well, okay. Tell you what, no one's going to strap you down. You can choose. You can choose to get the vaccine or not. Tell me what you're going to choose to do. Right? They say, well, I'm not going to do it. Okay. Why not? Give me a reason. And they have to, the
Autonomy
only reason,
and freedom.
they can, no, but you can't just say because freedom, right? That's not a reason, right? If someone says, like the government comes along and says, we're making it, we're mandating that everybody has to wipe their bum after they take a shit. You're like, oh, hell nah. That's my freedom. You can't tell me to wipe my butt. I'm not wiping my butt anymore, right? We would think you're a lunatic, right? We'd say, well, why aren't you wiping? Why don't you want to wipe your butt? You're like, oh, because freedom. Like, no. Your actions have to be compellingly rational, right? Otherwise, your freedom isn't meaningfully being restricted. Like restricting you from doing irrational things is not a meaningful restriction on your freedom.
So then the question is not why are you up in arms about vaccine mandates, but why are you not getting vaccinated yourself of your own free will?
Yeah. Okay. So okay. Okay, what? We're not going to force a vaccine on you. Okay. Are you going to get a vaccine? No. Okay. Tell me why not. Right? Give me a reason. We are giving you the freedom to choose. Tell me what you're going to do. I'm not going to do it. Well, why not? Right? You have to give me a reason. Right? And so that goes back to the science. Right? Because they can't use this appeal to freedom. That's not a reason not to do it. Okay. Now they have to come back to the claim. Oh, because I think vaccines are more harmful than COVID. They have to. Otherwise they have no ground to stand on. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. Wait, you're telling me that you're worried about your health, but you're going to choose the more risky option, which is to get COVID several times in a pandemic? You're not rational by the standards that we agreed to. Right?
Okay.
So you have to bring it back. And then the other one, well, that's related. Yeah, it's just this like appeal to freedom. Well, I have the freedom to choose to do with my body what I
then why are you locking me out of the the library? Why are you stopping me from going to the movie theater? I've made my choice for my body. I've decided to whatever risk COVID. How's it your right to tell me that I can't get in a plane?
Yeah. I say, okay, you're right. It isn't my right, but I just want to understand your reasons. Tell me why not. Okay. You seem like a reasonable guy. Tell me your reasons. Right? I respect you. I think you're a very knowledgeable person, and if you know something that would be important for me, for my decisions, then I would like to know. Help me out here, right? So don't go down I wrote my dissertation on vaccine mandates and how they're politically justified, so I can go down that road if I want to, right? But just say, okay, you're free to do what you want. Now tell me what you're going to do. Explain it to me, right? And that brings it back to the science, right? And so just no matter where they go, oh yeah, well it's this big power play by the elite. Okay, so suppose there were no elite people, and lizard people or whatever trying to get us to get vaccinated, and but just like, like some what is it? Like virtuous people came up with the vaccine, the exact same vaccine though. Would you take the vaccine? Oh, no, why not? Right. So just always bring it back.
Okay.
Um,
So how else am I going to try and derail this conversation? The shifting goalpost one is huge. I mean, then it's typically there's an ad hominem, like attacking, in the case of the states, Joe Biden, attacking Anthony Fauci, attacking individuals. I don't think most people know who the head of the World Health Organization is anymore, but maybe they attack him as well.
yeah, I mean,
You just back to the science.
you say, okay, so yeah, he's an evil guy, evil genius, whatever. But so tell me why you're not going to get the vaccine,
Okay.
right? Agree with them. Everything they say, agree with them. And then just bring it back. So tell me why you're not going to get the vaccine.
Okay. And then that presupposes that you can win the argument and that you have
I
access
know I can.
to. Well,
I know I can because
but you're scientifically literate and I'm scientifically literate, and we could probably win the argument showing that any possible.
This is the thing. There's no. Okay, so this is really the key, right? And I've mentioned it before. Is as long as you make it a comparative claim,
Mm-hmm.
right? You will always win. They can't win that. It's not possible because there just is no evidence that coronavirus is more dangerous than the vaccine. It does not exist. And so I'm totally comfortable they can give me all the VARS data. I know it's bullshit, but my position still wins even with that crappy data. I don't even need to dispute it. So yeah, give me whatever you want, but then we have to say, okay, compared to what? That's a pretty serious risk. If it were twice as risky, would that be even worse? Yeah. Okay. What if it were 3 times? Yeah. Okay. How about 10 times? Yeah. Okay. You just walked. You just basically conceded my point, right? By your own
Standards,
commitments. Yeah, by your own standards.
So when you've tried doing this with people, what's their typical next? I imagine a certain percentage of people just stop talking to you.
They never give me the evidence, ever. Not once. Not one anti-vaxxer has once given me evidence. They'll send me the myocarditis stuff, and I'll say, okay, I'll say, I'm kind of cheeky now because it's just like, like it's kind of over it. So I'll be like, one thing I really respect about you is that you're such a good independent researcher. And unfortunately, like, I've been indoctrinated by the education system and I'm not very good at it. Do you think you could look up the rates of myocarditis for the same age group for COVID? Because I just can't seem to find it. And then they never post it. Ever. Not once.
Okay. So what about dealing one-on-one with friends who've been rabbit holed this way?
Yeah, so I do that over Messenger now. So, I mean, you have to, this is the thing. So, like, one thing is like the logic, right? The other thing is the tone. So I think, like, I'm just so exhausted by the whole thing that I don't have as much patience that I should have. So maybe I'm the wrong person to talk to about, like, how to be really patient with people. But I just try to say, look, I really want to understand your position, right? Can you give me the evidence? That I said, you seem to believe this really strongly. And I assume that when people believe something strongly, they have strong evidence for the belief, right? And I'll say, like, as a wise man once said, so this is David Hume, right? A wise man proportions his beliefs to the evidence, right? So yeah, the number one thing is just make sure that you constantly bring it back to the scientific question. And then the other thing is make sure that the claims are comparative.
Okay.
Right. And I'll ask them to look it up for me. So, like this one guy, he's just like, it's like a deluge in my messenger box. I said, you're such an awesome researcher. Can you find this information for me? And he'll never post it ever.
No. Yeah, I think when dealing with people one-on-one, I think the idea to when I think of people who've had really bad cases of conspiracyitis, right? That everything's a conspiracy. And then you run into them years later and they've completely changed their tune about it. I think it would be unhelpful to like, hey, you used to believe this other stupid thing, because then that basically walls them into having to maintain that position at all costs. Whereas if you allow them sort of the luxury of you forgetting
I have
the
a
stupid
friend
thing that they used to believe.
Switched, right? He went from being pretty hardcore conspiracist. So he switched and he went the other way. Like he went hard, like anti-conspiracist. And now he's just like on there fighting conspiracy theorists. It's kind of fun to watch. But I think you're right. Like, you don't want to rub it in their face. You want to just just like smile inside.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right? I've seen some people adjust and this is perhaps hopeful, adjust their stance from, vaccines are going to kill us all. This is all, government tracking, liquid microchips, blah, 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 to now 6 months later going, for you, Stephan, I would recommend the vaccine, blah, blah. Like, that's a huge shift right there, right? He's gone from all vaccines are evil, they don't work, and they're part of this big pharma thing, to maybe some people should get it. It would be unhelpful for me in that moment to go, we're not that different in age, you and me. And besides, here's what you used to say, right? That's just rubbing their face in it, and it's preventing that off ramp. So I think you almost have to, at certain times, be graceful about it and just forget all the stupid shit they said if you value the relationship.
Yeah, that's a key point there, right? Like, how much do you value the relationship, right? There are some people, that I've been friends with on social media, back from high school or whatever. I don't care anymore. Like, go believe your crazy shit. And other relationships where they are deep into the conspiracy theories and anti-vax, but I love these people dearly, and I'm committed to the relationship. And I'm, even though I don't always succeed in being empathetic and in asking my questions, the right way. Like, I really do still love these people, and I try to engage with them as a friend would.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you may be one of the few sources of rationality in their life, because they go down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, I mean, so Aristotle, famously said that no man would choose to live if he had no friends, even if he had everything else, right? And like, part of the reason is that our friends are the only ones that can really correct us when we go wrong. Because we know that when our friends correct us, it comes from a place of love and of genuine concern for our well-being, right? Whereas like someone we're just like just very casual relationship with, or just like some random person on the internet, there's no reason for us to believe that they have our best interests at heart when they correct us or tell us that we're doing something wrong. But our friends want the best for us. And so when our friends do correct us, we should stop and listen, right? And so, the problem is going to be, when people, family and friends, start to abandon all these people that have gone deep conspiracy theory, all the people that actually cared for them and could bring them back to a good path are gone in their life, and there's just no way back for them, right? Or the way back is very hard.
Yeah, it's embarrassing. You'd have to admit that you were wrong, or admit that you changed your mind.
There were some articles. Yeah, there were some articles of like QAnon people that were saying they're so embarrassed, and they kind of confessions.
Yeah. Well, part of me, the vindictive, not so good part of me, says, "Well, you fucking should be." The other part of me is the family members in that group. Like, no. It's understandable why you thought that. So it catch me depending on which day you catch me on. I'm capable of being both.
Yeah. They're there's that darker part of us that wants to rub their nose in it, but it's best not to if we really love them.
So where do people follow you? Where do people read the stuff that you've written?
Yeah, so they can go. The main place where I'm active, quasi-active, is my blog, which is wrestling-with-philosophy.com. So wrestling with philosophy. I started a podcast, Philosophy for the Vulgar. My podcast partner is trying to finish his dissertation and deal with the academic job market. So we've taken a hiatus, but we will eventually get back. There are some episodes that I think are pretty decent that people could listen to on political philosophy.
Just call that season 1.
That's season
marketing.
1. Yeah,
season 1 is out. Season 2 is going to be releasing soon.
Yeah, I don't want to push him. I know what he's going through, so we will be back. And I guess people can follow me on Twitter. What is my Twitter? It's I think it's Philosophami at Philosophers Be Like. Philosophers is spelled FILOSOFERZBLIKE. I made that a long time ago. I'm not proud of it.
I have a friend whose Hotmail address is like christmasprincess@hotmail.com. She made it when she was 15. And so this is your... So FILOSOFERZBLIKE on Twitter.
Yeah. Philosophami. Can I throw one last thing in there for just like how to handle this sort of stuff? Again, this goes back to philosophy of science. So whenever we're dealing with competing theories, there's some criteria that we use to decide which theory we should opt for, right? And these are widely accepted among all philosophers of science. The first is explanatory power, right? How well does each theory explain all of the observable facts, right? The second is predictive power. How well does each theory predict what's going to happen? So people make predictions within the theory, and we see which predictions come true, right? And the third one is parsimony, which is kind of a very technical term, but it's often understood as like do not multiply entities. So basically, if you can explain a phenomena using kind of only the entities that we know exist versus we have to invent new entities to explain it, I should choose the explanation that doesn't multiply, doesn't make me like hypothesize new entities. And this is another thing that I'll challenge anti-vaxxers with, right? They'll say, okay, explain to me, because your theory has to explain what we observe. Explain to me why the rate of hospitalization, ICU stay, and death is higher for unvaccinated people than it is for vaccinated people. Your theory has to explain that. If you don't have an explanation, then there's a problem with your theory, right?
Straight also to conspiracy. That's just what the hospitals are reporting. That would be the answer for a lot of the people that I know. That's just, how do you know? Like I went down to the hospital. I didn't see anybody sick.
Then I'll ask for evidence. Say, okay, well, give me the evidence that vaccinated people are actually hospitalized at higher rates or die at higher rates. Give me the evidence. Okay, fine. You say this is all false? Give me the evidence. Right? Always ask for evidence. Bring the receipts. Right? And then predictive power. Right? And this is like, early in the pandemic, I knew because I wrote my dissertation on vaccine hesitancy and vaccine policy. I knew that anti-vaxxers were going to say we're going to see all these like side effects, right? All these like people dying, right? So I said, okay, let's bet, right? Let's bet. What do you predict, right? Or you can say, well, so the Omicron wave is coming. What does your theory predict? That vaccinated people will fare with boosters will fare better, or that unvaccinated people will fare better? What's your prediction? And let's see which theory has the better prediction, right? Or let's say counties with high vaccination rates versus counties with low vaccination rates. Which one's gonna fare better?
It's a bullshit argument, but what you're going to get back when you say that, from personal experience, is, well, natural immunity is better than vaccinated immunity. Israel, some variation of that.
Yeah,
and that is an insane argument. You're saying essentially that the best way to survive a car accident is to first get in a car accident. The best way to survive cancer is first to get another cancer. It's a crazy argument, and
it's also empirically false, right?
I'd say that that science is mixed from what I've seen. There's a couple studies saying that one is better. Other studies say the other is better. It does seem that right now the agreement is if you've had COVID and been vaccinated, that your immunity is amazing.
The best. Which is what I'll say. I'll say, okay, so natural immunity is better than vaccinated immunity. So is what we're trying to do here, are we trying to maximize immunity? Is that what you want to achieve? Oh, well, look at this. The same study says those who were vaccinated and had a previous infection had the highest immunity. Well, so how about, you've been infected, why don't you go get vaccinated now? Right? Or go get vaccinated so that way when you get infected, then you're going to have the maximum immunity, right? Because that's what you want. You want to maximize, right? Right? Why the level of immunity conferred by, infection? Why is that the optimal one? Why isn't the higher level of immunity better? By the reasoning, it should be the higher level.
I like the subtle word replacement that you did there, because it is one of my goals to never use the term natural immunity, and to, as much as possible, replace it with infection-induced immunity or disease-infected or disease-induced immunity.
Yeah,
because natural ties in with the whole naturalistic fallacy. Remember our Tibetan Buddhist grass? That's natural. Therefore, in addition to having all these purported powers, it's also natural. So how can it be bad for you? So the term natural immunity is a loaded term. It's a strategically chosen term. And can we all just please start using the term infection-induced immunity or disease-induced immunity?
Yeah. 100%.
All right. Go forth and spread the word. So to all the listeners, we're still here after an hour and a half of listening to Ami and I go down rabbit holes and rant.
That's very cathartic.
Yeah. Just don't let anyone use natural, or when somebody says natural immunity, pare it back infection-induced immunity and see how that works for you. Let me know.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks so much. Good luck with your teaching. Good luck with your pajama wrestling. And I hope it's good on a body that's been beaten up by judo for decades.
Thank you. Appreciate it.